Hey,
All
folks,
right,
sorry.
we are live. All right, welcome, Brooks.
Oh, sorry I'm late.
All right, we are calling this meeting to order of the Affordable Housing and Community Equity Development Commission. It is January 27th, 2022, and we're going to start with our roll call. Nancy Lipson, Vice Chair.
Here.
Terry Bond, Commissioner.
Here.
Pat Sheridan. Commissioner.
Here.
Elijah Hurd Blaine.
Here.
And then we have our staff liaison, Teresa Wellman.
Here.
And two very honored guests of the Housing and Human Welfare Committee, Chair Alderman Dwan Gay and Alderman Brooks Schandelmeyer. So terrific. It's so great to have the group together. First, let's just dispense with housekeeping. We do need to approve our November meeting minutes. Those were distributed earlier. Any comments, edits to them? Hearing none.
I move that we adopt them.
And is there a second?
I'll second.
Right. All in favor, say aye.
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 They are approved. Fantastic. All right. So the agenda for the meeting tonight is really to review this commission's 2021 recommendation. So a little background, I guess I'll just sort of start with that. This commission had made recommendations last fall, and they were presented to the Housing and Human Welfare Committee in October at your October meeting. And as was explained and discussed, our recommendations really stem from the commission's review of Anne Arundel County's workforce housing legislation. And that review was required by the HACA consent decree. So, we really spent the bulk of our time last year taking a look at the county's workforce housing legislation and reviewing it, researching it, discussing it, and came up with basically three recommendations. There's three parts to our recommendation. And, the first one really relates directly to our review of the county legislation and trying to get at something that the city can adopt that would be something, substantially similar in the city. The second and third recommendations were really born out of sort of discussions we had and research and review. Hopefully this meeting now will provide an opportunity. Hello, Alderman Tierney. Glad you could join us. Really, we're just getting started. This meeting will provide an opportunity for us as a whole group to be able to meet and discuss the recommendation. So if you think it's helpful, I can bring them up on the screen. Should I do that? Good. Yeah. Seeing nods. All right. So let me do that.
She's mastered the skill.
All right. Everybody can see that?
Yep.
Okay. I guess Alderman Gay, you tell me what's helpful. Would it be helpful if I did sort of a brief rundown on all three of them, or is that not necessary? Or
you want to do a brief of them just so that we can get refamiliarize ourselves?
Okay. Yep, I will do that. Okay. So the first recommendation, which you see here on the screen, as I just alluded to, really was the one that is trying to get at replicating what Anne Arundel County has adopted, for the city. And again, this was required by the HACA consent decree. The city was, under mandate to do this review. And so the commission did that on behalf of the city. The county legislation provides for more flexible zoning for affordable housing development as a conditional use. And a conditional use is a way to do zoning that the city is not using. So the city does not have a conditional use zoning. And instead, the city has in the past really accomplished major site development through what's called the Planned Development Code. And the Planned Development Code is an allowable use through many, many zoning areas of the city. And so for that reason, our recommendation really focuses on this idea of creating a new planned development to provide for some flexibility in bulk regulations that would, facilitate the development of affordable housing. We be sure to emphasize here that we want to make sure that whatever is adopted, ensures that there's appropriate scale and appropriate massing, for neighborhood character, et cetera. I will just mention that these affordability restrictions, the rental housing restriction, where we're saying 60% of the units are restricted to 60% of area median income for a period of less than 40 years, matches the county's rental housing restriction in their workforce housing legislation. And it also adheres to the low-income housing tax credit affordability requirements. The home ownership unit restriction, where we say 40% of the homes developed as part of a subdivision consisting of 10 homes must be at 100% of area median income. The 100% of area median income matches up to the city's MPDU home ownership requirements. So that's where that came from. And the rest of, the detail of this was sort of discussed and developed as part of our discussions. So, in a nutshell, the idea behind this is to create more flexible bulk regulations to facilitate affordable housing over a wide variety of zoning areas. Now, I will say that this is a very complicated and technical thing to do, to take what we have on paper here and convert it to legislation or to zoning. And so, what we've discussed is really, doing that would be out of the purview of this commission, and, really would look towards the expertise of staff to be able to take this idea and formulate it, to something that can be used for zoning purposes. I can keep going with recommendation 2 and 3, or do you want to stop there?
That's just actually a quick question. I'm sorry, I had my little icon hand raised. For clarity for me, if you would give an example of and I ask this all the time, the area median income, and like, for example, I think ours in the city of Annapolis, if I'm not mistaken, is like 75 maybe. So what would that look like in regards to, how would that apply to this this scenario, I guess?
So, and I don't have that information right in front of me, but the area median income and the city of Annapolis actually uses a Baltimore region metric for a family of 4 is, and maybe Pat, you might know, it is roughly 104,000. Elijah, you may know it as well. You're on mute.
I'm actually pulling it up right now.
Okay. And then, so the way that would work, let's say it is, about 100,000. So then 60% of that is what the income would be restricted to. So family of 4 would be, somewhere in the low 60s in terms of income. Does that make sense?
Which, yeah, that makes sense. And that seems about right to me. That's livable. That's like teacher, public safety officials. Yeah. So that's perfect. Yeah.
And of course, the home ownership would be a little higher at 100%, median income. Thinking that, just you would need that higher income level to qualify for a mortgage, is really the idea behind that.
Yeah, Alderman Gay, just it's exactly what kind of you said. Sorry, I'm flipping between a lot of screens here to try and I pulled up like the low income limit off of the HUD user site. And so the low income limit for a 4-person household is $79,900. And that's the 2021. Of course, the 2022s haven't come out yet.
Yeah, but low income, that's 50% of AMI.
Well, yeah. So low income's 8.
Oh, you're breaking up, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think you dropped on I thought
is 30. So that's 79.
Yeah. HUD uses different, that's what's confusing. And Pat, please help me with this. HUD uses different designations for extremely low income, and yeah, so the median income though should be at the higher level. But we can certainly provide all that to you in writing.
I see they've got 105 $1,100 for a family of 4 for the AMI for that HUD calculated.
There you go. That's what I thought it was. Yeah. So,
That's
okay.
the 100.
So that's sort of in a nutshell recommendation 1. And let me just keep moving on, and then we can just open up the floor for total discussion. So again, this was really getting at trying to replicate the Anne Arundel County workforce housing legislation and trying to adopt as best we could something substantially similar in the city. And this is what we think achieves that goal. Recommendation 2 and 3 is really just sort of born out of, sort of further discussions we were having as a group as we were spending time reviewing the county's legislation. And the second recommendation relates to this, this idea of missing middle, which I think we're all familiar with, which really, I get a fish shake from Alderman Chandler, talks about, facilitating duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes. And the idea here with this recommendation is the idea of the city adopting a global policy about this, sort of just trying to articulate what is it? Well, first of all, what are we envisioning when we say missing middle, and where do we think that it works best in the city? And sort of developing a policy that would guide then the nitty gritty of going in, targeting by zone bulk regulations that would facilitate this kind of development. I think in the discussions we've had, we really think that makes sense for when we think about redevelopment of a large development opportunity, such as, you think about it like a mixed use development opportunity, for example, where you've got retail on the first floor, you got apartments above, and maybe next to that, you have some duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, you have sort of a mixed use density kind of going on. That fits really nicely with that idea. But also, there are some infill opportunities in the city. And, we think that this concept fits in really nicely, with those opportunities as well. A lot of jurisdictions throughout the country are really focusing attention on this. I think there's a lot of examples of policies there that the city could look to, sort of further their understanding and desire for this type of housing. And then, finally, the recommendation 3, you can't talk about affordable housing development without talking about money, because, that matters to developers. I mean, really, honestly, though, this idea of streamlining the permit process and reducing the cost of fees, it really is more about certainty, providing a level of certainty to developers so they understand the timing. Time is money. They understand how long it's going to take. They know exactly what the fees are. And that really helps increase comfort level, when they, for developers working, certainly. And then we also, talked a lot about this idea of a payment in lieu of tax under a streamlined approval process. Again, this, streamlined process provides a degree of certainty. And the idea here is to provide some relief to properties who have limited rent income from having, affordable rents or from having low priced home sales, to be able to, have a relief from having to pay full income taxes. And that, sometimes having that full income tax payment can really
Property
provide a
tax.
financial hardship. So
Taxes, not income taxes.
did I say income? Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. Property tax. Yes. Thank you. Yeah. Property tax. Yes. And actually, this payment in lieu of taxes really applies to rental housing, not the home ownership side. This would be something that a rental community would be able to.
Although it could conceivably apply during a period in which the developer still owns the homes before and the site before they sell them. So, there's some small tweaks that could be done, I suppose, if it were necessary.
I think Alderwoman Tierney has a question.
Oh, yeah, hi. I know I keep thinking I can scroll this document, but going back to number 1, it's somewhat related, but last year we did pass Kathy 06 ordinance, what was it, 06-20 for planned development and for public housing bulk standards, speaking just specifically on bulk. And we allowed a 20% increase in the height limit or other bulk standards allowed in the low-income housing developed pursuant to Section 42 of the Federal Internal Revenue Code. So that's in line with what you're suggesting with number 1. At least it's a first step, and that ordinance was approved.
Right.
Were you
Yeah.
aware? I don't know if you were aware of that. The bulk and
Yeah.
density standards were increased,
I am
specific for
aware.
low-income housing.
Right. I am aware that I did see that. And again, we did have some help from some of the city staff, about how to understand this plan development code, because it is quite complex.
Oh my
And we
God,
talked-
yeah. Thank you, Ross Arnett. Sorry, gotta say it.
It
Oh,
really
private
is.
joke there.
But my understanding and talking this through with the city staff is that, that's even still that bulk regulations that you're speaking of isn't quite enough to
Yeah.
get us there.
Understood.
And
Yeah.
and then, also when you look at, I can bring it up. When you look at the zoning areas in which this plan development applies, it's really is a wide variety of zoning areas. I'm not sure the bulk regulations apply to all the zoning areas. I'd have to double check that, but I think that was one of the constraints as well.
Kathy, just a question for Alderwoman Tierney related to that. Alderwoman, that 06-20 ordinance, did that apply just to public housing?
Yeah, it was a height adjustment for, quote, certain eligible public housing development. It was
Oh.
specific, and it had, the reason for it was projecting the proposed development of Harbor House being tall, taller, and it had allowance, wanted to get ahead of the curve here and make an allowance.
Yeah, that was for the CNI choice neighborhood grant. And to your point, thanks Alderman Arnett, because I have a feeling that it may be a little bit difficult to undo to replace. And so I guess we'll have to look at that. I completely forgot about that. That was, would that have been passed in maybe June-ish, May-ish?
Yeah, it was passed in April, but it was
okay.
a good thing. I mean, it allowed for, yeah.
Because we were competing for that grant, but in the future, will it be difficult would it be difficult to undo that, to allow for increased bulk height restrictions? Do you think it would bring up any concern?
But this is 20% increase. That wouldn't be enough?
Yeah, my kind of impression is that we're seeking to not rescind, but rather expand, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. So that bulk regulation you're speaking of was adopted this past year in April of
Yes.
2020. And that's
Yes.
not the one, because there are other, okay. I need to
Yeah.
look at that because
Yeah.
because
Oh, yeah.
there is other
06-20.
relief for affordable housing in the code. But again, it only applies, it's my recollection, to very specific areas. So that's not what I was thinking of. I'll have to look at that. The
I
one.
know, I
from
wish
here.
I knew how to share screen. Maybe I'll figure that out by the time we.
Well, if you want to do that, I can stop sharing mine because I think I need to do that for you to share. Do you want me to do that?
Or do you want me to just email you this?
It should be a little green button at the bottom that says
Yeah.
share
Share
screen,
screen.
and it'll allow you to select which, do you want to share the whole screen or just the tab?
All right, let me get these other windows closed up.
Or do you want
here.
to share all your emails so we can read this?
Believe me, there's nothing exciting in that. Okay, keep talking.
Well, but to your point, Alderwoman, we have discovered how complex and technical this subject matter is.
Oh, did you stop sharing or?
Yes,
am I?
that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got it.
Yours is
Yep.
up there now.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
So it is public housing.
Oh, yeah. It was specific
Okay.
for public housing.
Okay.
Is
Because-
this a signed one? Yeah, this is a signed one. Done deal.
Would have been, yeah, May, yeah.
Mhm.
And
That's-
the caps is what was revised to the code. So it's, what you're looking at is the code, and then the revision is in all caps.
All right, and I see Alderman Schoenemeyer, you have your hand up.
Thank you. I want to talk about the missing middle program or platform or whatever we're trying to come up with, or call it. So here is my big thing when it comes to I mentioned things like community character earlier and all this other stuff. I am a big believer that, one, we do need a serious missing middle program or to allow missing middle housing in the city. But if it's going to work, we need to be bold and allow it everywhere in the city. Because if you start going, well, what about community character? The richer neighborhoods that are very invested in the status quo are
Say
just
no
going to
thank
push
you.
it on. What's that?
We'll say no, thank you.
Yep, they'll say no. It's like, no, that's against our community character, which blind community character goes back to when they first invented single family zoning. And this is citing the color of law to explicitly keep Black people out of neighborhoods. So we need to go anywhere where there's an R1 or an R2. You can now build a duplex, triplex, quadplex. And I think community character should not even be mentioned when this presentation is done. It's going to be some legislation I'm going to do to try and allow it, because again, if we're going to be serious about actually allowing housing affordability in the city and not just give it lip service for more than people who qualify for below market, which immediately is going to fill up. And there are also a lot of people in this area who don't qualify for below market units, but can't afford the rapid increase in cost in the city housing. Everybody, I'm preaching to the choir here, but
Can I ask two questions though? Number one is, as we've looked across the country of where they've done this, they have been careful about doing it. They haven't done a widespread, what you're talking about. I think that's one question I'd have. And that's mostly because you're opening up to so much opposition, you might get it killed before you even get it off the ground. So I guess that's just something to think about. The other piece is these neighborhoods that you're talking about that are wealthier neighborhoods. Could people afford to really buy that land and do what we're talking about and making it affordable? So I guess I'm saying that only because we talked about being careful and not to roll this out and get it killed right away, because we know people are going to be concerned. They're already concerned about new development almost everywhere. So I'm just putting that out for conversation. That's all.
and that's why California and Oregon took zoning away from their localities.
And that was
Because-
also why Minneapolis did the same thing. Minneapolis took the step of Terry passing a citywide ordinance preventing R1 for the exact reasons that the alderman is pointing out, in that it neutralized local nodules or community nodules of opposition by standardizing the playing field and completely eliminating the ability to have.
So, but you're saying the state did that?
The state ended up doing it. I would love Maryland to come in and tell us
Yeah, I don't-
you can't do it anymore. I'd love the state to do it because I think that'll be faster and actual impact statewide, but we have control over this one area. This is an issue I am willing to fight for. I'm willing to spend so much political capital for. I think
So I
we
guess-
need to be bold with it.
I I guess
as
the wording is important, but as an ex-planner, I think you need to take into account the community, how a character, whatever. I just don't think you could put anything anywhere. Maybe that's because of my planning background. I don't know.
And Brooks, when you say community character, are you talking, because when I think community character, I'm thinking facade, like the physical structure. You know how they like everything to look like we're in Nantucket. Right?
Yeah.
Are you speaking of that, or are you speaking of community character, as in, you know, the population that resides within a particular geographical location? Okay, yeah.
And a little bit of the first one too, because I think if I could ideally craft a thing, I think height limits. Every building in the neighborhood should have the right to go up one level from the surrounding area by right. You're in a neighborhood with a bunch of 2-story homes, you should be able to add a 3rd story. Because that's how cities were built since humans literally started building cities, you know? But anyway, it's just something I think we should be bold here. We're the ones who got to worry about blowback from constituents. I personally have the characteristic that I don't care, because how we've done our entire city programming has caused a housing shortage in Annapolis. And that's why the city is so ungodly expensive, even for people who have good jobs and don't qualify for the below market units. And unless we start approaching below market and market, we're just going to see this gap widen. So go bold, guys.
I hear it. I hear it.
Let us cower from our constituents. And, you know, I'll tell my colleagues, tell your NIMBYs no. But, you know.
Pat, you have your hand up?
You're on mute, Pat.
No, I just caught it. Well, actually, 2 things. One is I agree definitely with Alderman on that, citywide zoning changes. We're working a little bit in Minneapolis on another project I'm on doing ADUs, and it's nice not to have to fight that neighborhood by neighborhood. Not that it's necessarily going that much faster, because there's always issues, but at least it's taken away one barrier. My other comment was about the ordinance 6-20 that maybe to broaden the impact of that, just strike the word public housing so it affects all low income housing, or it says public housing and low income housing, just make sure it's included.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just public.
Yeah, it was obviously done for a specific purpose. So you could say you would be able to do the Choice Neighborhoods grant.
Right.
So, and maybe that's how you managed to get it through. But
is that something that the committee would be willing to, and you don't have to answer it now. Actually, in fact, you can sleep on it until our next meeting. By committee, I'm talking about housing and human welfare. Is that something you all will be willing to introduce as a group together, striking the word or adding the word low income? And that's something that we could possibly talk about on the 22nd as well, February, at our next meeting. But just
Yep.
I mean, I would be interested in how that change would compare to what we're proposing. I guess my concern would be, making sure that it's not an either or, because that change may not get at as drastic of an overall support for affordable housing as to what we're proposing. This plan development code is just so complicated that it really does take, folks from the staff that have the expertise in the zoning code to really sit down and kind of go through it. And I'd be interested in their opinion about making that change versus what we're proposing, and what's the difference. And
I just looked at the existing change, and it looks like, I don't know if it was limited to public housing itself, but it certainly was limited to tax credit housing. So everything that we're doing is not tax credits.
Right.
So that's something to keep in mind.
And I thought, Alderman Tierney, when you first brought it up, that there is in the code some relief for affordable housing development using tax credits. So that is in there as well. But again, it's very there in a targeted, specific way, is my understanding.
This is the, I heard that, but this is the staff report of the respective legislation, in which is actually, 7 from 5. Yeah. Means that those projects that's to receive a tight tolerance of 30%. Yeah. It's funny because I hate to amend this even more. I feel like it's like we're compounding an error when we work with this code.
Yeah. So should we just leave 0620 as is and move forward with your separate piece of proposed?
Yeah, I
yeah.
think so, Dawn. It is, otherwise it is like compounding an error.
I think you're right. Absolutely. Just let it stay. Yeah.
Yeah, this stuff is it's not for the faint of heart. As I've really learned.
Another portion that was discussed in the affordable housing task force, but I'm not sure if it was included. Well, it wasn't, because there's only 3 recommendations. But the property tax credits, that was huge, and I spent the last couple of weekends drafting legislation to provide property tax credits. And so I submitted it to the Office of Law, and they'll have which would be a draft, like first reader, they'll have that to me by February the 18th. And so I did it separately, obviously, because I didn't want to impede on any way with the 3 recommendations that we'll be trying to move as a block. But so this legislation, it provides a property tax exemption for 3 years for public safety officials working for the city of Annapolis. So that would mean anyone from the police department, fire department, or Office of Emergency Management. But they have to be employed for at least 8 years, 8 consecutive years. And it also provides the incentive for any Anne Arundel County public school employee that is not a contract employee. So it would include the janitors, the lunch ladies, the administration, the teachers, and I focused on those 2 professions because that is kind of, well, for 2 reasons. One, over the course of the last year, they have been griped with just so many different situations because of the pandemic. And I also look at that as the perfect profession for entry-level affordable housing that we're trying to create. When you're a teacher, you know how teachers are, 50,000 young families. So I just thought it would be great. We did have to set some caps and requirements, and that's what we're working on now. I have a individual maximum income at $80,000 and a couple at $160,000. Obviously, the Office of Law will advise on if they think that's appropriate or not by the 18th. And so, yeah, it would provide for a 3 years of property tax exemption, and for your property to qualify, it has to be of a certain lot size, because you can't have a mega mansion and get a property tax credit. It has to be of a certain lot size, and or you'd have to. I already stated the income qualification. That's where we are right now. But I'm curious to hear what your opinions are, and if there are amendments that you think would be needed.
What happens after the 3 years? What happens in year 4?
Well, I'm assuming they would go back to just, paying your property tax.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what comes to my mind is, if it's really is a financial issue, then year 4, they're going to have the problem again. And is there a way to prorate it, maybe instead of bringing it back 100%, maybe bring it back slowly,
Okay.
which would be commensurate, presumably with an income, increase, pay increase, maybe. But that would be right. Alderman Schneidermeyer, you have your hand up?
Yes, I have a little bit of number data as well, that the new census information came out that kind of stresses we got to be bold here. And I think the urgency of needing some serious zoning reform when it comes to allowing multifamily units and taking a good chunk of and actually seriously addressing housing affordability. Did you guys see the new census data?
I haven't seen them. Mm-mm.
So the new census data, our city grew in population by about 2,400 over the past 10 years. Approved housing units that were built has been 642.
Yeah.
Now I've asked planning and zoning for a little bit of a breakdown on that number. Only 120 of those were multifamily, and those were all below market HACA units. So that means all of the market rate housing that was approved, 522, was single family homes, which, as I'm talking to a bunch of housing advocates, is the most expensive type of house based upon just like the large quantity of land required to purchase it. And because of that, population-wise, that we are losing, we had a decrease in population from 18 to 24, and this is all according to the U.S. Census Bureau, of 10.3%. We had a population decrease in what I'll call the prime age of people that we want to start getting with younger families, between 25 and 34, of 17%. The only type of population we've seen an increase in is 35 through 44, which, it's still pretty good. But then we lose people between 45 and 54 and 55 and 64. And then we get a pretty significant increase in 65 or older, which, is fine. But if we're going to be a little more sustainable of a city, we need to start having young families be able to live here too. So it's a little bit of numbers. I can forward that data over to you, Kathy, if you wouldn't mind shooting me your email. Sorry, I don't know it off the top of my head here, but it's, I think, pretty significant and shows why I'm so gung-ho on hey, multifamily units are good because it lets families like mine afford to live here.
Right. Yeah, that would be interesting data to have. I haven't seen that.
Yeah, I'll stop hijacking the meeting now, but I think everybody here needs to be aware of just how serious this issue is and why, along with all of the literature and studies, I'm we need to build homes.
Yeah, and the topic itself, it's just it is so wrapped up in the zoning code, and the city zoning code is, really, really complicated. And I know, with the comp plan, the comprehensive plan, I had understood in talking with Eric Lashinsky that, one of the goals was to try and streamline some of that. And I don't know, I'm curious as to what your senses are, alder persons, about that, and whether or not that is something that, could be accomplished as part of the comprehensive plan.
Ron and Ellie, I've hijacked this a lot with my thoughts, so I'll let you go first.
Well, I'm glad you talked to Eric. Eric's just great. And to be fair to him, he's done a ton of work on this comprehensive plan. So we do have to be sensitive if we're doing any sort of zoning overhaul. But my thoughts are that we have opportune sites. And I guess it's relative to what Terry was saying, is Annapolis, you got to do baby steps, or you're just going to get shot down. I mean, it's a reality. And so we do have opportunity areas along Forest Drive. We couldn't even get the Forest Drive. Brooks heard me say this before. We couldn't even get the Forest Drive sector study approved because some of my colleagues were saying that if you have multi-use development, you're going to get low income housing, and everybody was scared they were going to have these high towers of, it was awful. And now look what they got. They got car wash. They're going to get probably another Lidl, whatever you call it, and a, I mean, you see the signs for sale. There's land there for sale, and so my point is that and then also Harbor House. I mean, we gotta fix these. I don't know what else to call it. It's like, these. Could you imagine if we redeveloped Harbor House? What change that would do to Annapolis? I mean, it's right now. I mean, it's kind of like this. It's like the donut hole theory. It was like what happened to Detroit. All the whites moved out to Grosse Pointe, and then got this donut hole in the middle. You got to come back and you got to rejuvenate it. You got to rebuild it. And I don't know if we should fool around with existing scale. I don't call it community character. I call it scale. I mean, you do have to respect the scale of some of these communities. You can't put a 6-story building on the shore of Eastport. You just can't. So let's just focus where we can.
Well, and there is a lot. I've been reading a lot too about a desire to, I can't remember the terminology they use, but a desire to really have like a place-based
form-based zoning.
Well, not the form-based, but the idea that everybody has their own separate entrance, because everybody has their own, whether it's in a duplex or a quadplex, you can still set it up. Everybody has their own front door. You have this sense of ownership. You have this sense of being part of the community directly, that instead of having to come down an elevator, you can actually go out your door and down some steps and, access the rest of the community around you. Is a different feel than coming down an elevator and going through an apartment door. And that all kind of does relate to this, idea of just appropriate scale and
we
building more densely, but in a way that feels comfortable.
Yeah, and we have architects that know how to do that. They're out there, and there's developers that know how to do that. They're out there, and we don't have any initiative to go out there and get these developers. I mean, we're keeping our fingers crossed that Newtown 20 is going to be successful, and we don't know, So I understand we want to be broad-based, but like I said, I don't know.
But Ellie, to your point though, to Alderman Chandlemar's point as well, I think both can be done. Just looking at the history of the city of Annapolis, and in particular, its housing history. There are already several duplexes and multifamily units in Ward 8.
And some triplexes.
And triplexes, and in Ward 1, on smaller streets. And so I think we have a history of multifamily housing here.
Yeah, that stuff doesn't, it doesn't impact scale. I mean, I think that's why I don't want to bring it up, but that's why I get mad about the short-term rentals, because some of those houses could have beautiful, apartments. I mean, just, and be chopped up or whatever I have to do. But I mean, I think you've seen in Ward 1, the firehouses that were converted to apartments and all that. So you can work with that scale or whatever you want to call it.
So the issue is just more the height as opposed to the design.
Height is a big deal. Yeah.
Okay.
Height is a huge deal in the historic district. You're going to get a lawsuit from Historic Annapolis if you fool with something we promised, back in 1960. So,
Elijah, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Kathy. Alderman Tierney, you'll recall that when we presented the Housing Affordability Task Force recommendations that we
Mhm.
presented on the same day as the planning recommendations that Dr. Nash and Eric had been working on as well. And what I found particularly comforting was that there was a strong alignment between some of the planning recommendations as well as the Housing Task Force's recommendations. And I think, Alderman Gay is really, encompassing what the spirit of the findings of the task force were, which is that we can do both. And I think it was my impression in conversations with Eric as well as Dr. Nash at the time that they felt the same, and that everything that I've heard you, Alderman Schandelmeyer, and Alderman Gay and Kathy say, I am not hearing any of that be mutually exclusive. I am hearing a sweet spot in there that does allow for duplexes and quadplexes. It takes into account the historic nature of the city by not allowing for above, not wanting 6, 7, 8 stories. But
We
as
can have that on Forest Drive.
and I think one of the challenges though is that what Alderman Schandelmeyer's point is that if you nodule it up, it allows for, quite candidly, politically, there to be the ability for what's known as NIMBYism to arise and create political and neighborhood by neighborhood opposition. And so to change some of that underlying planning that does allow for duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, but does maybe find that sweet spot in there. I think that's where, if I'm hearing you very clearly say that an expansion of 0620 is compounding a problem perhaps by not resolving.
Oh, no. Oh, I meant complicating the code. That's
complicating that
yeah,
code. And I'm hearing
yeah.
what you're saying, that may not be the mechanism
Right.
to use to do that. And I'm hearing that loud and clear. But I would offer that if that is not the appropriate mechanism, that there is a sweet spot that I think we're hearing consensus, not only within this group, but among some colleagues that you have here, and that's already been supported. City staff supported the recommendations of the Housing Task Force and the planning changes. So there is a lot of consensus among the folks that need to be consensus among. And I think particularly now that we're on the other side of an election, and we've got clearly some passionate individuals who clearly see the historic kind of nature and arc of this and are looking at the current data and seeing how that data is showing that it's continued to compound. I think we've got a really unique opportunity in this next year.
I agree. I think we have to help Eric because the comp plan is a springboard for that. That can be really utilized to our advantage, because the linear part is, you have the comp plan, and then that translates into, that's our policy that translates into code, into zoning. So that's huge. I mean, and I want to make sure that everybody, doesn't put that comp plan on a shelf somewhere, because Eric's really worked hard on the housing initiative, to your point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I feel like our, our 2 recommendations for the plan development and the missing
Right.
middle policy really go hand in hand with the work that he's doing on the comp plan.
Yeah,
And it supports. Yeah,
It complements what he's doing.
yeah.
Well,
We were
Dewan's
very-
Dewan's legislation has a, if I understand it correctly, because I know Senator Alfred was looking at this as well, is we don't have it isn't like they're looking for a property tax. They're here. We need police and we want them to come and live in the city of Annapolis. So to offer them a property tax credit is an incentive.
That
So
was
that's
also a huge
yeah,
caveat due to the
that's-
ongoing issues that we have. Absolutely.
yeah.
That was the question I had, Dewan. Is it to be used as an incentive to bring people into the city, or
Yes.
is it also available to people who currently own and who need a break?
That
They
is
don't-
it's
yeah.
for both. So
Both.
I
It
have
is for
not.
both.
I have not specified any requirement as it relates to do you have to live or already live here. Ideally, I would love for it to bring in a ton of new younger families, that are looking for a
You
place
got
to.
to have housing first.
Well, yeah, true. But just for in particular, like in Ward 6, we have a number of homes available in the low 3s, low 4s, high 3s, low 4s. And I think that if you are a couple, with underneath of that $180 threshold, that you could get into that and, potentially 3 years of saving that property tax money or whatever you want to do with it. Cause I'm not, mandating bank accounts, but I think it could go a long way as it relates to helping them establish themselves here within the city. And that's how I'm proposing it, as more of an investment into the future of our residents, in both teaching and public safety.
Yeah,
Sorry, by the way, that I had to leave before because my dog was demanding. I saw your cat there, Brooks. So
Oh, not mine this time.
I had to leave and take my dog out. He was pawing at me.
When I saw the tail, I thought for a minute it was a snake. I couldn't figure out what it was on the screen.
Oh,
The cat's tail.
That's Lucy Cat. She sometimes gets curious.
Alderman Gay, I did have one other question on your legislation. This is just pertaining to people that own a home, right? Did you give any thought to sort of a renter, for how to help someone that's renting that is in those professions?
I didn't know how to include that, and is so specific to that what the city council can mandate with the property tax.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't sure really what angle to take it. We had attempted to previously. We met with, I think, Joel, discussed the possibility of the property tax for renters, and it kind of was complicated as it related to, would we give the tax cut to the actual property owner, or how would that work? And so that's why I kind of stayed away from it right now. But if you would potentially have an idea, I would love to hear it, see if it can be integrated. Absolutely.
It could be done it could be done both ways. I mean, it could be done.
Go ahead, Nancy.
It could be done by providing a reduction or exemption from property taxes to the owner, or it could be done potentially by giving a credit to the renter equal to the share of his rent, his or her rent that is attributable to taxes that the owner pays. It could be done either. That would be more complicated, obviously.
Just on background, I spent many
Hours
trying to come up with exactly what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
And I went down to property tax record levels in different wards and started to do the calculations on what's the sweet spot. And the challenge that we ended up coming up with was that the overall quote unquote return on investment in terms of the number of households that we could impact, as well as the fact that it would potentially impact the city expenditures or tax revenue. When that was initially proposed, there was, I would characterize it as strong skepticism as to the scalability of that. And as a result, we did not get the traction that had been hoped for.
Well, it's also that the city in Annapolis, you pay city taxes, county taxes, and the state too has some, they're all kind of related, as I recall.
Right.
So I don't know that it's a simple idea.
No, that, Ron, did you talk to Shanika about this or Sarah Elfreth?
Yeah,
Because-
I talked to them, mentioned it to them last year, definitely.
Yeah.
And what and again, the reason that, because as Elijah has mentioned, he worked hard on this during the task force. And the reason I've decided to simmer it down to these two professions was because of exactly what he said. There was no scope for scale of how much lost revenue you'd have. And with breaking it down to these two specific professions, you would definitely be able to have an estimated loss of revenue. And with the two qualifications that I've proposed, with the first being using zoning guidelines from the Department of Planning and Zoning to limit the application pools to homes that meet the lot size maximums or establish a set maximum based on property value. For example, your home couldn't be worth more than $500,000 to apply for this program, so that finance could actually go through and say, okay, we know that there's a potential that we could lose $325,000 in property tax revenue based off of X qualification. And so that's why I tried to just make it simple with these two. I know the first two things that I'm anticipating pushback on are, one, the lost revenue and property tax, and two, why didn't you pick my profession? Why didn't you pick? There'll be a lot of, what about this and what about that? But as I said, if you're teaching, you're instructing the future leaders of America. That is no light job. And if you're protecting our public safety, that's a foundation of city government. And so, those two things stood out to me the most, and that's why I moved forward with those two groups.
And I guess the only other thing that comes to my mind is, when I asked you what happens in year 4, so another way to maybe skin the cat, so to speak, would be, graduated even the, first year 100, next year something less than 100, third year, and keep on going, instead of the 3 years 100 and then something. I don't know. That's the only thing. If somebody's buying a house, and if you're bringing them in, if you're attracting them and they're buying the house and they know they have their property exemption, how much of a financial hardship will it be for them in year 4? You don't want that to happen either. But I don't even know dollar amount, how much we're talking about, what the city tax, what the city portion of that tax is on a $500,000 house, for example. Alderman Shanamar?
I mentioned this in a previous smaller meeting and many a conversation. Parking requirements.
I remember that comment.
Yep. There is significant studies from academics and urban planners that show parking requirements add significant cost to projects and even just make smaller scale development unfeasible. So because building on a small parcel of land, a duplex or a triplex with accommodation for parking, you don't have enough space to do it, so they just don't do it. So I would humbly request an examination of parking requirements, at least for small scale development and also for below market units, workforce housing, because those things do add up costs and prevent feasibility of projects. And I know this gets pushed back. We're going to get pushed back on all of this. So let's just come forward with what the best practices
are. Terry? Yep.
Well, so again, one of the big things we got when we lowered parking standards in neighborhoods is craziness among the people that moved in there and a lot of anger. So I guess cost is one thing. The other thing is making it adequate for the people that are going to live in there. And if you look at housing with teenagers and young people, they need parking. So I guess you got to be flexible but reasonable and not cut it back so much you end up with a lot of angry people and a parking situation that doesn't work. So maybe looking at other ways to provide common areas of parking.
The High Cost of Free Parking by UCLA professor Donald Shoup. Basically, the basic premise of this textbook that I will not wish on anyone because it's a slog, but it basically, anytime we try to accommodate only for cars, we end up losing more land for cars. I am trying to figure out ways to actually start making residents who want to park on public streets have to pay for it through residential permits or something, because that is city land and we are wasting that. And by providing free parking, we are subsidizing car use. And it is effectively a tax on people who do not own cars. And parking requirements also spread everything out even further, requiring even more car use, thus hurting goals of walkability or transportation-oriented development. So I get the hesitation. I get why some people are angry at the idea of it, because it is how we've built cities since the 40s. We decided we're going to treat cars just as importantly as treating people and homes. But we've seen that cause a climate crisis that who knows if we'll ever be able to even fix. We've seen that cause an affordability crisis and a sprawl crisis and a traffic crisis. So we got to pick a point at some point to go, hey, this is what we need to do if we're going to adequately solve these issues. Call me naive, call me an idealist, but again, I ran explicitly on these things, and I got over 2/3 of the vote in my ward.
Alderman Tierney.
Yeah, and if we are coordinating, I mean, one of the first things you think of is if you're getting rid of parking, do you have a reliable transit system?
Exactly.
And we probably score a C- on that. However, I think the demo of Hillman and getting that offline is probably one of the best things we could do to tell people, to have people start looking at alternative ways to get downtown. And I know that our acting director of transportation is working really hard to expand this on-call micro transit system, which is, using our paratransit buses to pick up people, in West Annapolis or in places where there's not enough bus stops, but pick a common area where people can get picked up on call. So you got to do that. You got to make sure you have that alternate, mobilities.
Right.
And we are going to get another bike share company coming in. The funny part is I think they tell us that the scooters are coming with them.
Yes, scooters. I do want to add, and I know I pick a lot of very bold things that I know will create pushback. So I understand hesitancy on some of these things, but if we continue to keep parking or car storage, as I like to call it now, on par with housing as the same equally important things, we're just continuing to encourage more car purchases and more car use, and therefore ignore the transportation options further. It needs to be a little more inconvenient to drive, and that might make someone more inclined to take the bus, take a walk or bike. And I say this as someone who lives on Forest Drive, a very car dependent area, but I take a bus to work before the pandemic 5 days a week, and post pandemic 3 days a week. So I know it may theoretically be easier if I drive, but why I don't drive into DC is it's really inconvenient and expensive to park. So I'm just going to take the bus. So if we make it a little more inconvenient for that, maybe that family of 3 doesn't buy a car for their teenager. Maybe they go, you live a mile away from the restaurant you want to hang out with your friends at. You got nice shoes. You're 16. Take a walk or ride your bike.
Brooks, that's fine for you. I'm going to be 75 next month. I'm not walking anywhere. Well, I am walking places, but I'm not walking.
Even with
Mile.
nice shoes, right?
Yeah,
But-
even with shoes and
And that is also why, one, we do need to take walkability as a little bit more of a serious issue, because it would make walking to areas, and this also ties to mixed use development, so I want more the housing commission with these conversations, but by allowing things that are closer to you, that makes that walk a little bit easier. Also for people who can't get around without a car, like literally. The making it inconvenient for other people to drive makes those other people's driving experience a little bit better, because they're not competing for the same amount. They're not competing for other parking. They're not sharing the road with other people, because people are getting around without cars better. It's ironically why driving in the very walkable Netherlands is actually a really wonderful experience, because a lot of other people are getting around in different ways. So you have a little more of the road to yourself, and it's not the trying to drive around and find a parking space like in car dependent suburbia, where it's just a nightmare all around.
So I'm looking at the time. It's 10:08.
I'm dominated.
Alderman Tierney.
I know time-wise, I just wanted to put a plug in. I think you'll like this. Dawn co-sponsored it. I don't know if you heard about my sprinkler bill. Oh, it just so happens that I have it here. Hold on. No, all you have to, wait, I'm getting cocky at doing this. Okay. This is all you need to see. The Director of Finance shall give priority to those seeking assistance for buildings that include long-term residential units. And that's my effort to get the upper floors of Main Street populated with people who can live there. And I'm not talking about high-end apartments. I just, I mean, you look at Harvey's building with the 4 stories and it's all storage units. But I have to be careful. I mean, the objective of the bill is to protect these houses, because they are irreplaceable. I don't know if you've been downtown, but there's a house like on Duke of Boston that had a fire 2 years ago and it's still sitting there vacant.
Yes.
It's awful. So yeah, that's the only, and we are also doing everything possible to make it easy for them, because we're only doing it where we have the sprinkler line to the curb.
Mhm.
And then we put in the legislation, okay, when we continue to do that in the streets, when we start giving you those laterals, they're called, to the curb line, you have commercial businesses, you have 3 years to put in a sprinkler system. And I've lived downtown long enough that those property owners need a jump start in a way. Like they're gonna sit back and say, oh, okay, I have to pay for this. It's nice. I have a loan. I'll have to pay back the loan. It's a 1% loan. How do I do that? Oh, well, maybe I'll rent out my top floors. I mean, that's the secondary effect of it. So I just want to put a plug in for it. I really
Yes,
hope.
it's almost a housing bill. It's pretty close.
I just, could you imagine if we just get residents living on those upper floors the way it used to be?
Mhm.
But
Now if we can only make sure that it's affordable.
exactly,
I
I was about to say, the
I don't
key
have
though,
greedy.
the key though with that, because as I search around looking for apartments in Annapolis,
Oh, God, yeah.
scrolling through stuff, and they just have everything listed, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this apartment is so amazing. It's right downtown. I think it was actually like above the Chipotle or something like that. So it's on National.
Oh,
Yeah.
that was a Hollander.
This is really, really nice. Looking at it, gorgeous, like, 1 bedroom, not $2,500 a
Oh,
month.
no. Yeah.
$2,500. I'm like, that's more than a mortgage. Like, that's insane. And I know the view is nice, but
Oftentimes that is the case, especially with the low interest rates, that you can, get a
Yeah.
mortgage and that your monthly payment is less than rent. So
Yeah. Unfortunately, you're right. I haven't seen anything under 2,000 downtown, just on Maryland Avenue above the
I
stores. and
just read
stuff, but-
something nationwide that rents went up 13.7% in the last
Yeah.
quarter.
No.
So, I guess wrapping up, I'm not quite sure where to go from here. Alderman Gay, I would welcome any ideas.
Kathy, I just wanted to say, having 3 Alder representatives from the council here, it really, I feel really changes the tenor of the conversations.
Yeah.
And I hope each of you have found value in what you've heard this evening. And I really hope that on a more regular basis, you all, your schedules, I recognize, have a lot of demands on them. But if this is a forum that we would be able to be with you on a more regular basis, it would really, I think, be of value for the community, quite candidly, because I really do think we can find a lot of interconnectivity and really kind of help form up thoughts that then can very quickly be translated into action because of your positions of power. And so I hope that this is not a one-off opportunity.
Madeline has to make sure that we get the invite, which I think she gave me probably. I don't know. My colleagues know it was kind of a weird afternoon.
And we typically would be joining more frequently, as I used to chair this until they pried it out of my hands. They realized the power that this committee was gaining, and they were like, not this kid. But no, I think this was fantastic for us to meet with you all today, just to, again, spit out ideas. The next steps, though, and they have to be concrete because as time starts to wind down, we really want to get that legislation in.
Right.
I've requested a meeting with the Office of Law for this team here to meet. I'm still waiting to hear back as it relates to dates and actually who will be assigned the attorney to our to the committee, really. I'm not sure if that'll be Ashley or Joelle. So I'll get that information and I'll CC the chairs on that thread so that we can start to inch forward as to establishing a framework of this. And I think there was one suggestion of recommendation. Alderman Shandemeyer asked that you all look into parking requirements. And so if that could be done, that will be great as well. But I think that the 3 recommendations that we have are solid. Pilot, the bulk height restrictions and density increases, and why am I blanking on goal
The
1?
missing middle.
Missing middle, yeah. Missing middle housing, yeah, the most important. So yeah, I mean, my biggest thing now was making sure that we all had an opportunity to conversate and then trying to figure out how do we put this into a bill, because I don't know if it has to be 3 separate bills that we try to just keep as closely intertwined as we can throughout the committee process, or do we try to do one huge piece of legislation? I have a feeling it would be better probably if we split it into the 3, as opposed to the idea that I had originally of just lumping it together. But I'm more inclined to think something like the pilot and the planned zoning would be passed faster than the missing middle. And so I'd be, if whatever the group really wants, that's what I'm down with, the direction I think it would go in.
Okay. I go ahead, Terry.
Well, one of the things we talked about the missing middle is to show what it could look like, to show that it could work, because people will just freak out, increased density. But, I think it would be good to show different, not necessarily a specific neighborhood, although we could take a site and just not say where it is, but show how it could work. Because I know a lot of developers now are going around buying big lots, putting 2 houses on those lots and selling them for a lot of money. So, if you got a duplex or a triplex, it could look nicer than these 2 single family homes that are, very expensive and oftentimes not that well built and actually don't really improve a community. So if we could show it, get some good designers to show what it could look like and how it could add that diversity and make the community even better than it is at an affordable price. I think that would be good.
And I have a recommendation for a site we could use. The Small Road site.
Yes, yes. Oh, by the way, I've been communicating with Jody as it relates to the American Rescue Plan funding. I'm going to stay on top of that the entire way through because it will be a competition to just what's going to happen with that. So at some point, if a figure could be established, that would be extremely helpful. I've actually, as most recently as this past Monday, had detailed, extensive conversations with them as it relates to that. So a figure would be great.
Terrific. Thank you. All right. So that's definitely 2 marching orders. We're going to look at parking requirements and we'll take a shot at coming up with a dollar amount for you on that. Alderman Schoenemeyer, did you have your hand up?
Yes, I wanted to piggyback Terry's comments on how helpful it is to like show examples of those things, and messaging also matters a little bit. So like one of the things that I did on the doors, and this worked pretty well even in more spread out neighborhoods, was legalize the duplex, which actually got a lot of positive responses. So I think if for our missing middle portion, we don't talk about we talk about it as like an allowing of choice in housing, and allowing of these ways that humans have always built cities until in Annapolis, the 70s, it gets a little more positive.
Yeah. Messaging definitely is important, especially when it comes to talking about low-cost housing options.
It's affordable housing. Let's not say low cost. Let's say affordable
Housing affordability. Housing
affordability. Yeah.
All right.
Do you think
Good.
HACA should change their name, Dwan? I
At this point, we need a new name, logo.
Rebranding is important.
I think it's time to rebrand. Kind of maybe just switch around the acronym or something. I don't know. I'll leave you with that thought.
We can wait until shovel is in the ground from the CNI project, okay? So that gives us until 2024-ish to come up with a name.
There you go. And that, actually that we often, we affordable housing developers often do that when we buy a building that has been neglected over time and, obtain funding to redevelop it. We always, rename it and rebrand it because it is new. It's like a, it's a rebirth. So. Is there, okay, I think this was helpful. Thank you for your closing remarks, Alderman Gay. That was helpful to sort of, frame up where we go from here. Is there anything else from anyone at this point? Thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
One last thing. I'm so sorry.
No problem.
One last thing. Also found out that the first year amount for the trust fund is $32,300. They told me that this morning. And so that'll be available June the 1st. Teresa, if you could send me that outline you had again so that I could work on the requirements for it, that would be great. I tried to find it in email this past weekend, but I couldn't find it. Sorry.
And Teresa, you're on mute, but I do think that we need to, we haven't, as a commission, haven't really had a chance to talk a lot about that, about the future use of that trust fund and all that. So I'd like to be able to do that. Yeah.
I think we need to do that.
Yeah.
I will send you a blurb on what it's used for now.
Perfect. Yeah, because we want to try to adopt any amendments by May.
Okay.
And just so you know, in June, we will be having hopefully 7 MPDUs available for sale at Parkside Preserve.
Yay.
Think about
So
18
we need to
was
think
the number.
about, I'm sorry?
I think
Well-
18 was the number.
Well, it's 19, but they're not doing them all at once. They're doing them over a 3-year period, so there'll be 7 coming up in June. And so we need to think about with the trust fund. Right now, we can pay settlement expenses with the trust fund for folks that, but we may want to think about if we can get some extra money, we may want to think about being able to offer soft second mortgages.
How can families apply for that?
It's the MPDU program.
Okay, so just submit their name to the MPU. Awesome, that's fabulous.
And it's now moved back to us. ACDS is no longer processing. Since we have new staff, Denise, she'll be she's already got boxes of stuff stacked up in her office. So.
Right, that totally got lost in the whole conversation about the environmental issues there. I forgot they had MPDUs.
Mhm.
Luana, are you going to tell Rob that?
Listen, look, okay, house environment.
I mean, I'm a firm believer that housing policy is environmental policy, which is
Okay.
why I constantly am like density, good, less land
And
clearance.
Alderman Chandlemeyer, there are leaders of local environmental groups that share that exact same view.
Where are they? Where are they?
I've actually had very direct conversations with Alderman Savage, and he is very familiar with a man named Joel Dunn. Joel Dunn is a close friend of mine, and Joel is very aware of the work that I've been doing with the Housing Task Force. He's the executive director of the Chesapeake Conservancy and has been a big support of our work and has really offered his as much support as he can in working with Alderman Savage to join you all in helping push things forward. I've had direct conversations with both of them about the Community Land Trust, and while that's been set to the side for a little bit here, I would welcome anything that I can do to help bring them into the fold. I am very confident that we can get their support.
I think Denise,
Okay,
Green Metropolis,
your hands up.
living smaller, living closer, and driving less. I have
You in Clayton School?
you have a book for any topic, right? You name the topic.
I have
So Nancy and I can get our 75-year-old bodies on the bikes.
so I just
75
bought
too.
Learn to ride a bike.
I just bought a house.
Yes, budget
So
basics.
I just bought a house, so like my things are a little scattered while I unpack, but a lot of that's a fun combination of urban planning manuals and like environmental books, cookbooks, and then comic books because I'm kind of a dork.
Oh,
Probably better than Housing Authority reference manual.
Just so people know, I don't just make these things up when I'm like passionately arguing. Like I have things I'm citing.
I love the hacker manual. I love.
You're welcome.
Denise, do you have your hand up?
I do. This has been a learning experience for me, sitting with you all. In my mind, I'm looking at all of the different ways that you could develop housing and the ideas. And one thing that's sticking in my head is, especially Alderman Ellie, I don't know how to pronounce your last name.
Oh, I know. It's
With
by
her
marriage.
talking about Forest Drive. All I could vision was retail on the bottom and apartments on the top along Forest Drive. The parking would be in the back of the buildings.
Well, listen to that New England accent. Woo!
Oh, leave me be about it. But
I love it.
I seen that in a community that I grew up in, and that's all I could envision on Forest Drive was commercial on the bottom so that people can walk to the store, when they need something and go upstairs and their apartment's on the top. And so it's been really, my mind is just moving so quickly with all of these thoughts. And so I kind of tried to be quiet until I started talking about Forest Drive. Main Street, I think that I didn't understand the sprinkler. They're required to put sprinklers in the buildings. Now they have 3 years to do it. Is that what that
5
was
years. Well,
about?
the initial is 5 years. So,
Okay.
they can figure out a business model. They could probably do it in between tenants.
Right.
And then
my,
that will make it safe for residents
Right.
upstairs.
and my thought on that is if there was some kind of loan program
There is.
available to the owners of these buildings with some forgiveness of the loan if they rent to people in that affordability
Oh,
Bracket, like a
cost.
bracket, yeah.
Right. So and that affordability. So that would be a win for the owners and a win for some families or, people that could live in the city above the businesses. And the benefit to the owner would be a reduction in the loan for putting the sprinkler systems in. And that's where my mind is right now.
And the
Teresa?
best.
I just quickly wanted to let Alderman Tierney know that at several years ago, we made an attempt to apply to DHCD for money for exactly that.
Yeah. I remember
And
that.
we didn't get funded because they wanted to see what the need would be. And they had suggested that we do an inventory of all the properties on Main Street and what would be available, et cetera, et cetera. And we started an inventory and it just kind of never got finished. So.
Yeah,
It's a
right.
huge- It's
To
a
that
huge
point.
issue in senior housing and in nursing homes and other facilities for seniors. And the owners can't figure out how to pay for the actual sprinkling.
Right. And
It's
We
a
have
real
a,
problem.
we have a financial hardship clause in our code because I asked about that, but the best I could do to incentivize residential use first, make it residential, the use was to prioritize the loans. First come, first serve on the loan. We have about $300,000+ in the sprinkler fund. So when somebody that says they're going to do residential up there, like if the SunTrust Bank is an example, he put in apartments up there. That's kind of interesting. But to your point, I talked to the law office. They equated it with, rent control. But I do know that, some investors have helped in that situation. But Teresa, maybe we could do a re-inventory once we have, the sprinkler systems in, and they're very viable spaces for residential use. And maybe then we can look at some kind of affordable rent.
I think Brian Callahan still has the beginnings of an inventory. So I'll check with him and see if he still has it.
Okay.
sounds like a good summer internship project for some planning student.
Yeah,
Agreed,
does.
agreed, absolutely.
yeah.
Provides a
Thank
little
you,
thought.
Denise.
Denise, were you from New England or New York? I'm sorry.
New England.
Where?
I'm from Worcester. Sorry. Where are you from? Or you're
I'm
on
mute.
mute, Denise.
Okay, so I am from Rhode
Rhode
Island, not Long Island, Rhode Island.
Oh,
My family on my mom's side is from all around that Worcester area. So you
Oh.
might find out you're my cousin.
oh,
Yeah.
wow.
The names are hilarious. You can't help but have the accent when you start saying the names of the towns, Pawtucket.
Yeah.
In Worcester, you got Milford, is it Milton
Yeah.
and Milford? You've got Warren, you got Springfield, you've got Sturbridge, You've got, that's my family, the Paxton, all
Paxton,
those,
Holden,
those towns.
Webster.
Yeah. So
Okay, and Brooks is from Maine, so we got to
Yeah.
Google here.
I got some cousins in Maine, Brooks. Okay, where's everybody from? I might have a relative everywhere.
I'm two
It's
and a half
like
hours
Rhonda-
north of
Rhonda Pindle
uh,
Charles. That's-
2.5 hours
Yes.
north of Portland, up in the hills. So
Oh, it's beautiful up there. It's beautiful.
Cold.
Okay, I would love to continue the chat, but I don't have. If I had some wine, we could do this.
Look out, we're
all-
getting a,
Dinner.
getting a Dustin tomorrow.
All right, well, I mean, obviously, thank you so much for taking the time. Appreciate it, and let's continue the work, right?
Thanks for having
All right.
us.
Be safe,
Good
everyone.
night.
Night.
Meeting's adjourned. All right, bye.